Hi everybody, Elliot here, Lazy Dogs Records, and I thought I would do another 1970 records thread that's been started. Ron Haggerty did one. It had lighted a lot of the hard rock, heavy metal type stuff, and then Mazzy came in and just did the definitive 1970 for everything else, like singer-songwriter, rock in general, things like that. I mean, he did a great job. And as I watched those, I said, gosh, I don't know that I can, add anything to those. But I thought, okay, well, let's come up with a little different angle. So in 1970, there were some really good soul albums coming out. Right now, in the background, you hear playing Wilson Pickett, and that's Right On. Interesting thing about artists in the 60s and into the 70s, beginning in the 70s, it was no shame in doing a cover of somebody's song that had already had a hit on it. He does Sugar Sugar, the old Archie's, not old, but at that time, but the Archie's hit. He does songs he wrote himself. He does Steal Away. He does Dr. John's song, Lord Pity Us All. It opens side 2 here. He does, let's see, he wrote Groovin' Little Woman. Yeah, he did. He wrote, co-wrote Groovy Little Woman, and Funky Way, where he throws in expressions like sock it to me. Dates it pretty good, I guess. But Wilson Pickett, good album from 1970. The Isaac Hayes Movement also came out in 1970. And interesting, you've got only 4 songs on the entire album, and the shortest one is 5 minutes and 45 seconds. Obviously not intended for top 40 radio, which brings us to a point I'm going to emphasize after I show you a couple more records. Edward Starr, War and Peace, his big hit War, came out in 1970 as well. Look at that. Isn't that a cool cover? There he is with the peace sign. Boy, that's 1970 right there, isn't it? Yeah. In the world of bluegrass, you had traditional bluegrass coming out. Second generation bluegrass like Jim and Jess McReynolds. This is Wildwood Flower. You can't get much more traditional than that. It's also got songs like The Little Paper Boy, Violet and a Rose, Take My Ring from Your Finger. And this is Jim and Jess, great bluegrass duo. And here comes Chester. Come on in and get in your chair there, Chester. Ah, you're good boy. Okay. You also had I appreciate you coming and kissing me. This is an album by Bluegrass Alliance. Didn't sell a lot of records. It's called Newgrass, but what it did was it helped start a movement in bluegrass to expand the horizons of bluegrass, including playing songs that were pop or rock songs, not just the traditional songs, and some changes in the way the bands align themselves, arrange their numbers and things like that. This one's got Gentle on My Mind on it. Dan Crary was on this album. He was the lead guitarist in the Bluegrass Alliance. Also, other important members, Tony Rice was in the Bluegrass Alliance for a time. They're out of Kentucky. Sam Bush, also from Bluegrass Alliance, before he formed Newgrass Revival. So this would be an important album, even though it wasn't a big seller or anything, in that it was in the vanguard of things to come. In England, the folk rock movement, Fairport Convention, Full House came out in 1970. Rock music and traditional music blending together. Can't hardly beat the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band and Uncle Charlie and his dog Teddy. There's Uncle Charlie and his dog Teddy. Uncle Charlie actually sued them because They didn't get permission to use his image, and got a little money out of the deal. This, I know a lot of people are Michael Nesmith fans, and they had a minor hit, I believe, with some of Shelley's Blues, which, if I'm not mistaken, is Michael Nesmith tune. But the big hit, of course, was the Jerry Jeff Walker pen to Mr. Bojangles, which was huge for them. I also remember House on Pooh Corner from Winnie the Pooh. That's on this album too. This is a really good album. I advise anybody that likes traditional acoustic music and rock music. This is going to be a really good album to have. Also, Mountain was big in 1970. They put out Climbing and this album, which was Nantucket Sleigh Ride, kind of carrying on the Cream type format of the three-man rock band, and I guess they'd probably be considered a precursor to some of the hard rock trios that would come after them. But the point I was making about earlier about no shame in covering anybody's music or anything like that, that was a very common thing to do. Album rock for a lot of the country was not really what people were being exposed to much. FM radio was left for the confines of public radio and classical stations. Nobody had an FM radio in 1970. It was on the dial on some radios, but there were no stations hardly. And the album-oriented rock, where they would play not just the top hits, but album cuts, was beginning to emerge. And places like San Francisco or LA or New York, you would find stations like that. But for a lot of the country, that hadn't happened yet. It happened here where I live. I'd guess it was about 1972 or 3 when WQDR became the FM rock station out of Raleigh, which we all listened to. And your cars had AM only radios. You could not get an AM/FM radio back then. It's kind of like now you can't get cars with CDs. But we would buy these things called these FM converters. And if you knew what you were doing, you could disconnect some wires and wire it in, and it just sat down below on the floorboard, below your radio, and you could tune in. It was an FM tuner, is basically what it was. And I mean, that's exactly what it was, an FM tuner. And boy, if you didn't know what you had to pay somebody to do it. But everybody had an FM tuner in their car so they could tune in the rock station. That's very big. But up to this point, 1970, a whole lot of people were still, all you had was AM top 40 radio or variety radio stations. So you listen to radio and you could hear the Archies doing Sugar Sugar, followed by Jimi Hendrix, followed by Wilson Pickett. And so it had its advantages. It had disadvantages too, but it had its advantages. So what were some of the music that was very popular back then that maybe the albums weren't great? Because a lot of times, remember, before this, albums were simply there to sell, to push a single or multiple singles. They would hope to have more than one hit single on one album. So oftentimes you might have 3 or 4 good songs or 2 or 3 good songs on an album, and the rest was filler. And of course that changed as the artists got more artistic control, and you came up with concept albums and just generally did a little differently. But that held true in a lot of cases. Well, what was getting played on the radio? The Guess Who were a great band. They had that in 1970, American Woman and No Time were both in finished the year. It's a couple of the top 10 songs for the year 1970. Guess Who were a really good band out of Canada, and they maybe weren't cool though, because they were still using the hit single model in their production. B.J. Thomas was big. Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head from the movie with Robert Redford, I guess it was, and Paul Newman, wasn't the Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. War, I mentioned, you saw the album. Edwin Starr had that. How about Band of Gold? Anybody remember the song Band of Gold from Free to Pain? Somebody earlier mentioned Randy Newman, an emerging songwriter. Well, a band that doesn't get much love from that era was Three Dog Night. And but they had some really good songs. Hoyt Axton wrote several songs. Wrote Jeremiah Was a Bullfrog for them. And Jeremiah Was a Bullfrog was a friend of mine, were filler lyrics until he came up with lyrics to go with the melody that he wrote. And Three Dog Night heard it, and he said, no, just leave it like it is. We'll take it that way. Now, that wasn't 1970. I don't know exactly which year, probably 69 or 71 or something like that. But they did the Randy Newman song, Mama Told Me Not to Come. And Three Dog Night did. So there's Randy Newman, songwriter, beginning to get some exposure. Jackson 5 were huge. ABC, I remember that one. I like the Jackson 5. Never particularly cared for Michael Jackson, but I like the Jackson 5. Shocking Blue, were they out of Holland maybe? They had the song Venus. Talk about a soul song. Clarence Carter had Patches. Patches, I'm depending on you, son, to get the family through. What a great tearjerker type song. The Ides of March had Vehicle, and Joe South had Walk a Mile in My Shoes. B.B. King had his breakthrough pop song that really made him, elevated him into the mainstream out of just the blues with The Thrill Is Gone in 1970. It got up to 98 on the chart for the year. In country music, Merle Haggard had Fight Inside of Me. Lynn Anderson's song Rose Garden was big. Johnny and June Cash did If I Were a Carpenter. Tim Hardin, I believe it was. Tim Hardin penned a song. They rearranged it considerably and changed the lyrics around. That song's been done by a lot of people. It's been a hit for several people. There's a version is a little different. Chris Christopherson's Sunday Morning Coming Down was recorded by Johnny Cash, and that helped kickstart Chris Christopherson's career. That was a good one. But the big country hit, Conway Twitty and Hello Darling. What a great top 40 country song. I don't want this to run too long, but I got to tell you the Hello Darling story. Preacher moves to town and takes over as the minister at a local church, and from secretary he gets a list of names and addresses of the different parishioners, and he says, well, first day here I'm going to go out and meet the congregation. So he goes to the first address he sees there, and he knocks on the door, and they open the door, and the person opening the door goes, Conway Twitty. And he said, oh no, I get that all the time. People tell me I look like Conway Twitty. No, I'm the new minister at your church. I just wanted to introduce myself. Okay, talks to him a little while, goes to the next house down the road, knocks on the door, little old lady comes out, Conway Twitty. And he goes, oh, no, ma'am, I'm not Conway Twitty. I appreciate it. I know I look like him, but I'm not. I'm the new minister at your church, and I just wanted to introduce myself, say hey. And he goes, this goes on all day. Knocks on the door, and this beautiful, voluptuous lady, still in her lingerie, opens the door, and her eyes get big, and she says, Conway Twitty. And he says, hello, darling. That's my joke. Remember, be kind to your neighbor, and everybody is your neighbor. Take care, and Chester says, hey.